We are a multifaceted organization for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We are based in Livingston, New Jersey. We offer residential services. We have homes in Morris and Essex counties. We have a vibrant rehabilitation program called the Way Center. We also offer therapeutic services, so that's occupational, speech, and physical therapy for this community. And we are home to Heidi Gallery, which is a public art space that is dedicated to inclusive and accessible programming. We launched JSDD LifeHomeTech in the summer of 2023 with a grant from the federal government. And so we, thank you for joining us with our very first LifeHomeTech webinar. Susan Nasberg Abrams is here today, and she's going to talk more about LifeHomeTech. But before I pass it on to Susan, I just want to give you a few reminders. Please stay muted throughout the presentation until the Q&A, which is going to be toward the end of the presentation. This session is being recorded, so it's totally fine if you want to keep your camera off. Also, we will be adding directions for closed captioning into the chat, and you can certainly use that if you have questions as well. So thank you all for being here today. Without any kind of further ado, I'm going to pass it on to Susan so she can talk a little bit about this project.
Thanks, Aubrey. As she mentioned, I'm Susan Nasberg Abrams, and I'm the project coordinator for LifeHomeTech, which means that I run the day-to-day execution of this program. So what is LifeHomeTech? It's an initiative at JSDD to use enabling technology for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Our goal is to help create a greater level of independence and an improved quality of life. The program encompasses many parts, but our theme throughout the whole project is to always use a person-centered approach, which means that we look at the specific needs of every individual before we implement or recommend any piece of technology. Currently, we're working to integrate appropriate technology into our JSDD residential homes. We're also working to educate others in the broader community about how enabling technology can benefit those with IDD. That's where this webinar series came about, so thanks for joining us at our first session. We have 3 more sessions that you can sign up for today if you haven't already. These will cover the topics of improving safety at home, building independence with routines and drop-in support, and building independence with task prompting and social supports. Other webinars will be announced soon. Before we get started with today's session, I just want to introduce the rest of our team. So you already met Aubrey. Jessica Goldstein, she's the Associate Manager of Programs, Outreach and Communications. Along with Aubrey, she helped to secure this grant, so thanks, Jessica. And you'll hear from her a little bit more later. Randy Lesser is the Director of Quality Assurance for Technology. She oversees quality assurance processes and compliance standards and leverages tech systems to ensure high-quality service. She's working the back end of our Zoom today. Tatiana Copeland is the Project Assistant for LifeHomeTech. She helps us with the day-to-day process of making this grant happen. Tatiana will be watching the chat, so if you have any questions, we encourage you to ask them in the chat, and Tatiana will make sure that they are answered. I'm now going to pass it along to Meghan O Sullivan, who will introduce herself and lead today's seminar. Meghan?
Great, thanks, Susan. I'm really honored to be here, and I just have to say that working with the team over at JSDD has been such a pleasure. They're really so energetic and it brings so many ideas to our conversations. We've really had a lot of fun developing this grant as a whole and these webinars specifically. So I hope that we're going to be able to share a lot of really great information with you. So I have a Google Slides that I'm going to share with everybody. Let me pull that up. Very good. So as Susan said, this is the first in our series of webinars about enabling technology. It's a topic, it's kind of a hot topic that's out there right now. And we'll get into exactly what it is and how it can help build independence for the people that you work with or that you love as part of your family, or yourself if we have anybody who's on the call currently. We have 4 educational workshops that are part of this this initial effort. And really the goal with these workshops was to bring some of these enabling technologies that Susan identified and really help the community understand how they can support people in living with greater independence. So we focused on 4 topics. I included this in the slide. We'll be able to share the slides at the end. That way you guys will have this information going forward. But these are the dates that we have for the future presentations. Today we're going to talk about an overview of enabling technology. What does that mean? We'll focus it a little bit on medication independence, because I think it's easier to understand these concepts when you're looking at it through the lens of a particular device. The other devices that we'll be looking at in the future include Ring Video Doorbell, Amazon Echo Shows, and prompting and scheduling with tablets. And so the dates are there, and we look forward to seeing you on those presentations as well. In fact, I forgot to introduce myself. So before we really get into the definitions, I'll give you a little background about myself. My name is Meghan. My background is nursing. I worked as a nurse for a number of years in New York. And then in 2010, I partnered with Simply Home because I felt that technology had really gotten to a point where it could provide some really exciting supports for people and who wanted to be more independent. And so since that time, I've been working with families and organizations, and I do a lot of brainstorming with people, helping them create environments that are better able to support people in the goals they want to achieve. And one of those things I use is enabling technology. And that's really just a kind of the full definition is here, right? We always like to use too many words for these things, but it really boils down to anything that's going to help somebody live with greater independence. That can go all the way from the things like the Amazon Echo Show and Ring Video Doorbell, all the way to remote support systems and in-home sensors that can let you know what's happening within the home. But so I want to say what is enabling technology with some visuals about the technology itself. You'll notice some of these items you could just buy right now off the internet, right? Like an Amazon Echo, the Ring Video Doorbell. And it's important that we recognize, as we think about enabling technology as a whole, it's important that we recognize that we are all using technology. Chained to my phone, more or less. You know, it prompts me, it tells me where I need to be, it tells me where what time I need to be there, tasks that need to get done. I have an app for I use apps for all kinds of things to help me through my day. And so that's me using enabling technology. And I think most of us have integrated technology in one form or another into our daily lives. And it's important that we recognize that technology can also provide supports to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and really make things possible for them that would not potentially be possible without that technology. And that's what this is about. So it's all about, as we look at using these enabling technologies as a whole, it's going to be important that we recognize how much this really expands the possibilities for people. So it's very easy to get to have traditional ideas about how somebody is going to take medications or answer the door or do other things. But with technology, things can look different, and new possibilities open up in terms of ways that people can make things happen for themselves. But one of the underlying tenets that is really important to me and JSTD as well is that recognition of the dignity of risk for an individual. Because without that dignity of risk, I know we are, it would be the easy thing, right, to wrap everybody in bubble wrap and stand them in the corner and call them safe. But that's not a life, and that's not what the individuals want. And so in a very person-centered way, recognizing that individuals have that dignity of risk, it's an important consideration as you're looking at enabling technologies and using technology to help people achieve new things. So in terms of best practices, one of the most important things with regard to that is important to be person-centered, right? It's really important to start and keep your focus on that individual and what their goal is. Because one of the worst things that I see, we call it the shiny object syndrome, is people getting distracted by shiny objects. So things that are the latest and greatest and the newest and the most shiny can distract us and take away from other technology that might actually be more effective for that individual. So it's really about focusing on the person and identifying the goals that they want to achieve, rather than looking at the latest and greatest. You know, the new something new's come out, but that person wants to be independent with medications. It's important to just really focus on what their goal is. Also recognize it's important to go slow, because this is a change, right? So beginning where they are and going slow. Change over time, one step at a time, celebrating those wins. And remember that as you're changing, as long as you're keeping the focus on the person and you're forging that new path, you're going to end up in a good spot for them. So when we're looking at technology, I came across this phrase and I like it. It's the Goldilocks principle. And really, it's just about finding just the right amount of technology to support somebody, because not enough is not enough and too much is restrictive. So it's important to find the right fit. It's always a little bit of trial and error. And for the most part, in between, when you have something that's you're gonna a lot of times I see people getting over supported in the beginning, and then you're able to fade back a little bit, or as that person gains new independence, you make changes to their technology. It's about finding the right target. So today we're going to look at enabling supports through the types of the supports that are available with medications and taking medications, mostly because that's such a common stumbling block that individuals come across as they're trying to be more independent, right? So when we think of the types of medication supports that are available, I broke them down sort of into three main categories. The first category would be those devices that really just remind somebody to take their medications. The second one would be reminding and organizing. So a device that's going to help them recognize which pills go at which time, as well as those devices that are a little bit more, I don't want to say complex, but are a little bit more supportive, that would remind, organize, and communicate out if the individual doesn't access their medications as you're expecting. So starting off with those devices that really just offer reminders, these can really be a good fit for somebody who is really, really independent and is able to take their medications on their own. I use an app like this myself to remind me. I have two apps that I put up here. One is MediSafe, that's for Android phones. And the other one, it's actually not labeled. The other one it's called Round, and that's on an iPhone. You can just Google, apps for medication reminders, and you will be, there's an avalanche of options that are available for you. So it's important, again, to, in a person-centered way, keep an eye on what it is that you're trying to achieve, and making sure that it's a good fit for that person. Things that aren't too cartoony per se, or if somebody is able to read or not able to read, making sure that they understand how that works. Also, if they don't have a smartphone, it might be more this watch, Cadex watch, makes a number of different varieties, like some that look more sporty than this. And you can program this to alarm at various times a day if that's all that they need, just that little prompt. The apps also have the thing to acknowledge that you've taken the medication. Some of them also will text people if you have not tapped to acknowledge that you have, that you've accessed the medication. But the thing to consider with any of these apps or watches or alarms is that it's very easy to say, oh yeah, I got that alarm, and yeah, I'm going to take it in 2 minutes. But you actually have no idea if that person did take it or didn't take it, as far as actually accessing those medications or what pills they took. So it's, for a certain level of independence, it can be a great just reminder. Frankly, I think everybody probably needs to be using something like this, because the can't remember if it's the World Health Organization or the CDC, estimates that adults in the United States only take their medication correctly about 50% of the time. So quite a crazy stat when you think about it. So if somebody needs a little bit of more help with organizations, reminder and organizations, I would recommend something like this. You can see on here, there's a website, it's called ePill. I like it because it's sort of a clearinghouse of all of these sorts of devices. Some are larger, some are smaller. They make ones that are about this big that you could put in your pocket for a single day. That would help you organize, and it has a little alarm clock in it. But again, it'll remind you to take it, but if you don't access it at that time, it's not, if you said that you took it, it's not, there's no feedback there about what actually happened or not. For one of the things that I would want to make sure if somebody was going to use a device like the one on the screen is just in terms of dexterity, are they able to open that door or not? And again, if those medications gonna fit into into each dose time. So those are so we have like the least support is just that little bit of a reminder. Then a little bit more support is the reminder with that organization component. And then finally, we get to a device like this, which is what we were working with in the grant. And it's a device called a MedReady. It has 28 slots. There are other devices that are like this on the market. The Philips makes one called an MD2. It's quite a bit larger, but there are a number of devices like that out there. This device itself has 28 slots, so it can dispense medications up to 4 times a day. So what happens, how that works, is the tray that's there, see the tray there with all those slots? That's essentially like a medication bar, but in a circle, right? So each slot represents one single dose time. So 8 a.m., 4 p.m., 8 a.m., 4 p.m. When you go to load the medications, it comes with like a cheat sheet that you can put on top that will help start you out so that 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, you can load it in with the dose times, just like you would for a medication bar, putting all the 8 a.m. meds together. And then you program this very much like an old-fashioned alarm clock. That you just, advancing the hour and the minutes at the appropriate dose time, that tray will rotate one slot so that then the appropriate time medication would be available to that person. So if it's 8 o'clock in the morning, the tray rotates, it starts to beep and flash to remind them to take that medication. When they open the door, see the lid that's there on the left, that white kind of square is a door that slides up and down. So they slide up the door to access the medications that are there in the slot for them. If they have not accessed the medications in the programmed time frame, and that's flexible. It's part of the assessment as we go through and program this device. We would understand what that might be. It's typically, the default number is 30 minutes. So at 30 minutes, it would communicate out if that person has not yet accessed their medications. It doesn't have to be 30 minutes. It can be 2 minutes. It can be 2 hours. So we'll communicate that out. And it can communicate out via 3 methods. It can send out phone calls, emails, and text messages. So all those things go out at the same time, so that the person themselves can get a text message that says you haven't taken your meds, and parents, caregivers, whoever's assisting that person would also know at that point that the medications had not yet been accessed. One of the great things about the cellular version of this is that, say the individual, you get a notification that the individual hasn't accessed their medications, but they're at the movies, which is completely fine. If you had planned in advance, you could have advanced the dose to them from your computer at home, and they could have taken it with them to the movies. Or if they're not that independent and you'd rather wait for them to get home, when you get that notification that they haven't yet accessed, then when you know that they're home, you can call them and and talk them through how to access those medications. But you can also verify on the back end and see that they did indeed actually open that door. So what you see here on the right is what it looks like on the website. So green are the medications that were accessed appropriately, red are the ones that are missed, and yellow are the ones that were accessed what we would call like late, right? So that might be that the medications are due, at 7 o'clock. He didn't access it until 1:20 or whatever. But you would be able to see when you log in that yes, indeed, they did actually access those medications. So that gives a lot of reassurance that the person actually, did access their medications appropriately. As with any of these devices, it's going to be important to implement it slowly, right? And make sure that any transition to using a device like this or the organizers before or even the app is a supported transition, right? You don't just hand something over and tell them to have fun with it, just because it's not, obviously that's a recipe for failure. So I may come back to this picture if we have other questions about it, but so in terms of the MedReady features of this, again, it helps you organize those medications and dispensing at the program time. So it reminds that person by beeping and flashing. It will communicate out if the medications are missed. And again, that data on the back end can be shared with healthcare providers so that if they're having side effects or the medication is not achieving the goal that you have for it, you say with confidence to the medical provider that the meds are being taken, as, or not being taken, as they've been prescribed. Some of the things that would cause me to hesitate to recommend a MedReady to somebody would be if they're not interested in being independent with their medications using a device like this. Another thing that gives me pause is somebody who might break the machine to get access to the medications. The machine itself is designed to fall off a counter and survive that, but if you take a hammer to it, you can definitely break it and get access to those medications. It is a locked device, so it's not that they wouldn't get access to all the medications on accident necessarily, but if you took a hammer to it, you could break that guy open. Let's see. So we've talked about a number of different options with regard to being independent with medications, and I outlined the steps here as I would set them when thinking about using this with someone who wanted to be independent with that. But really, when you're looking at all the enabling technology that you're considering using, these are sort of the steps that you would go through anyways, whether it was a Ring video doorbell or it's an Amazon Echo that you're going to use for drop-in supports, or you're using an iPad for speech or scheduling or anything else really. It's going to be important to sort of go through these steps. And of course, the first step is making sure that the person wants to be using a device and is interested in being independent and is interested in exploring in it, because it is a bit of a risk, right? There's always a risk of failure. And by failure, I just mean that this solution may not be the one. And so recognizing that at the start and beginning with a flexible attitude is going to benefit everybody, right? So that if for some reason the person doesn't like the beeping, that can be turned off. If the flashing is not for them, that can also be turned off. But unless they know that's an option in the beginning, when they first start using it, they might reject it. It's important that they understand that they're not going to be that they're going to feel confident before you move on to the next level of independence. And really, so making sure they want to be independent, deciding on the goal. So for some people, that goal is going to be that they would ultimately be loading that device themselves and taking the medications. But for somebody else, perhaps loading that device is going to be too much. That's not going to be their ultimate goal. Their ultimate goal is really just going to be that if someone can help them set up the device, that then for the course of that week or the course of those 2 weeks, they would be able to do those medications on their own. And for a third person, it might really be their goal is that they want to access those medications on their own, even if staff are going to be there, with them, because it could provide that sense of independence that they responded to, the device itself. They get to access those meds on their own, even if staff do happen to be there because they live in a group home or setting like that. So it's about, making sure that they want to do it, deciding on what that goal is, right? So with the Ring Video Doorbell, what's the goal? How are you going to be using it? With the iPad, what are the expectations? And of course, that goal can change, right? As the person achieves that goal, recognizing that, celebrating that, setting a new goal. What's the next step? And the third step is one that I can't emphasize it enough. It's important that all members of the circle of support understand both the goal for that person and also how the device works, right? So that if the individual is telling the staff person that they work with that they hate the beeping and they would rather that their phone remind them around, taking the medication, so that they're using the device for that organization component, but they don't like the beeping on the device, you can set an alarm on their phone to go off at the appropriate time. It's important that staff would understand that that would be an option for them. It's also important to have it a part of the plan about what is the desired response. So if the individual does, if the circle of support does get an alert that the individual hasn't accessed the medications as you were expecting them to, what happens next, right? It's not that it shouldn't be, I should say, it shouldn't be that we've all then declared that it doesn't work and they can't use it again and we're going to scrap the whole plan. It really needs to be, a positive support. So when that person gets that text message, they can call or talk with the person to make sure that they're, gonna access their medications as they need. If the medications are super time sensitive, you would set the time to communicate out that the meds have not been accessed for a shorter interval, so that you still have time to get that response in there and make sure that that person takes the medications as they need. Because some of those, some medications like seizure stuff have very little window where they need to be taken. So making sure if everybody on that circle of support understands how the device works, what the goal is for the person and how they ultimately want to be using it, you're going to be starting off strong. The other the next step is really, and you can see how much that back end work is really important, because that fourth step is to begin using the device. And I would really recommend, whatever it is, make it a minimal change. So whether if they're going to be using the device and ultimately the goal is they're going to load it and take it all on their own, the first step should be use the device, but change nothing other than that the medications are now located in the MedReady. And so whoever has been giving them their medications or has been helping them with that should be standing right next to them, helping them make sure that, in case they run into any problems, the machine can be opened and, they can get their medications as they need them. That really sets everybody up for maximum levels of success. And then as they move through the various steps towards independence, so gradually stepping back, giving them a little bit more space, things like if you're standing right next to them in the beginning, then maybe you stand at the door, and then ultimately you're not standing in the room, but maybe checking 2 minutes afterwards to make sure that all the medications were removed from the device itself. As you proceed through that, then you can gradually fade that supervision. So moving back those in-person supports so that they are then using that technology to support them. It's really important, again, that you educate that whole circle of support with what the expectations are, because if that individual is moving along and everything's going great and they're taking their medications as you expect, and then the staff get an alert or family gets an alert that the person hasn't yet accessed, just that, again, what's going to happen. So then you're going to call, and it's a learning experience for everybody. Talk about it, but hopefully that, that enabling technology has stepped in there and provided a safety net so that that individual can continue that transition, that it's not a disaster. This is just a learning step along the way. If there are other supports, maybe we need to go back a step or two. It's gonna create a smoother path towards independence. I will say that one of the things that I see, not so much from families, but generally more organizations, is it's important to set concrete milestones. So, it feels often when we have these goals in plans that the goal is a little bit wishy-washy, and it's really important that it's that it's something concrete, like a number, 85%, or that they take the medications 90% on time, something like that. And once that's achieved, then they can move to the next level of independence. It really gives a good sense of control for people who are looking for independence in in any of those areas of their life. So that is what I have. I did see that there were a couple of questions in the chat. And I'm happy to, explain more, explain other, other devices.
Yeah, so the first question we had was from Anne. She said, who does the training on the technology? As a middle-aged parent, I have 1 foot in the century and 1 in the last. I'm probably not the best person to train my child. She trains me often. Good question, Anne.
It's a great question. It's a great question. I'm often also being taught by my kids what's what, especially around technology. And in a really good way, just from a 30,000-foot view, I have to say it's the user, they call it, the fancy word is UI, but it's user interface. Good technology is easy to use. And so with regard to the medication dispenser itself, we're going to have a whole other training on the intricacies, of that. We also have videos that will explain that how it works, as well as a longer troubleshooting video. It always comes with literature for those who prefer to read it rather than than watch that video. But the team over at JSDD, we've done a lot of work with them too, so they would potentially also be an excellent resource. But and the MedReady particularly, Simply Home would always be available to answer questions and provide support for that device.
All right, and we got another question from Bob and Mimi Soker. They say, what is MediSafe?
So MediSafe is an app. It's just an app that goes on the phone. It's an Android app. So just like Round is an app for the Apple, MediSafe is an app. Although I believe MediSafe is the app that if the person doesn't acknowledge on their phone that they took their medications, that it can communicate out, which is a nice feature. Although obviously it's that whole component of you don't actually know that they physically accessed the medication, but it is a nice reminder app if that's all that they need.
So to clarify, the app is for people to retrieve the data and so they can see it?
No. So MediSafe is you would program it to remind. So it would be on the person's phone, and at 9 o'clock at night, it would remind them that it's time to take their medication, and they would acknowledge on the app that they've taken the medication.
Great, thank you.
So it's just it's basically like a fancy watch, right? The watch is reminding you via an alarm. Now we often use the apps on there to be reminded about tasks. And the Round app for the Apple works just the same. It sends you like a ding reminder to take the medication, and then you just click I took it, on the phone, which is unfortunately too easy to do from the couch,
All right, and we have a couple of general questions that we've received. The first one is, what happens if the user doesn't have access to if the user does not access the medication, how long will the medication be available for them to take it?
That's a great question. So it depends a little bit on how you have things programmed. It's important to understand that when the tray rotates and that dose time is available, so say the 8 a.m. medications are then available. If you have it programmed to let everybody know at 8:30 that medications have not been accessed, you can program that for a much shorter time interval, or it can be a longer one if they're more independent or the medications aren't that time sensitive. So at 8:30 in this example, those text messages, email, phone calls would go out to say that, that this is the current situation. Those medications would be available to them in the slot until the next dose time. So at 8:30, everybody gets that notification. They call and the person says, oh, I ran out to Dunkin' Donuts and grabbed a coffee. As soon as I get home, I'll take the medications. So then when they get back, they can just open the door and the machine will register that on the website. So any parent or the circle of support could then log in, set an alarm for yourself for half an hour after you've spoken to the person. And you can log in on the back end of the website and see that indeed they took those medications at 8:42 in the morning, or that they accessed those medicines at that time. If there is a time, if there are medications that are very have to be taken within a very particular window, one of the ways that you can work around that is you would set a second dose time closer to that, like at whatever point you wouldn't want them to access. So if they take 8 o'clock medications that they should not take, if it gets past 10 o'clock, you would set another alarm for 10 o'clock that is just an empty slot. That it would, so those 8 a.m. medications would rotate away from being available. But if staff were there or somebody else was there, they could always open up the machine and take out the medications that had passed. So it's not like they go away forever. They just move past the window.
Okay, thank you for that. People were also wondering how much support is required to use the medicine dispenser.
So from a user's perspective, like I would say not the minimum, but the maximum, like if you're using the device maximally, like to provide the most support possible, the only thing that individual would need to be able to do would be to either hear or see hear the beeping and see the flashing light and know that means that it's time to access their medications. They open the slot, they push the door open and take out the medications. I usually recommend having a cup of water that you just keep right next to the device so that they can just take the medications right there. The capability of loading that medication dispenser is something that is going to be a good fit for some people and is not going to be part of their goal for other people. It's going to be beyond what they're capable of doing, but that just because they can't load the device themselves doesn't mean they can't take their medications on their own, on a daily basis, right? If they can get help with setting it up, then they can still successfully use that device to take medication at the appropriate time, as long as they understand what they need to respond to. But for other people, we have people who load the device and staff actually just sits next to them to make sure, or a parent just sits next to them to make sure that they're doing it correctly.
Thank you, Megan. And the last general question that we have is, how can someone with multiple medications at different times of the day use the medicine dispenser?
Mm-hmm. So it's also a good question. So each slot is capable of holding between 10 and 15 pills, depending, right? I can't make promises. If somebody's taking, some of those giant calcium pills and that kind of thing, you're certainly going to see less being able to fit in the slot. But as a general rule, we would say around 10 to 12 medications per dose time. So each slot is not for a single medication. Each slot represents a dose time. The device can do up to 4 dose times per day. So if you have 8 a.m., 12 noon, 4 p.m., 8 p.m., it can do that. If it's, 6 a.m., 8 a.m., 6 p.m., 10 p.m., it can, you could program it that way as well. It can do once a day, it can do, twice a day or 3 times, up to 4 times, 4 different dose times per day. I did want to also note another question I commonly get is about what happens with something like an antibiotic gets added to the medication regime. And the answer to can you use this device with something like that is a qualified yes. You can. My hesitation around it is that I don't like to change things once people have really become accustomed and good at using a device to support them. If the antibiotics time fits in their regular dose time, absolutely, you can add that pill right to the slot. But if that dose time doesn't fit into the already scheduled programming, for lack of a better phrase, I would then go with a backup plan for that particular dose time. Just because you don't want to be changing, if you were really comfortable, perhaps you would want to, they usually take medications twice a day, and this is the 3rd time, and you're just gonna, for those 7 days, add an extra dose, and you feel comfortable doing that, you certainly can. But I recommend those, like for temporary medications like that, that are only going to be for a week or so, that you stick to either the regular dose time or that you use a backup plan for that medication.
Thank you for that. We do still have more time for some more general questions, but please stay tuned because we do have some words from Jessica. She'll share more information soon. So if anybody has any general questions or if you had personal questions, you can feel free to email us.
Thanks, Tatiana. And Megan, thank you so much. I just, we've been in so many meetings together, and I've seen the MedReady at the demo apartment that we have, and I've seen some other dispensers, and it's just great to hear it from you again. And remember that it's sort of, we're meeting people where they are, and every situation is different. And I also liked hearing about those apps. I think that's just super helpful too, and a different way. I also want to thank everybody that joined us tonight. And this is the first in a series of 4 free webinars that we're hosting in connection with the grant that we got with the very strong support from Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill. If you would like to apply for one of our free MedReady devices or other enabling technology devices, please look for an email that we'll be sending from LifeHomeTech@jsdd.org. The email will have a link to walk you through the application form, give you a timeline of our process, as well as some guidelines. The email that we send is also going to have the slides from the presentation tonight. We hope that you'll share what you heard tonight with your friends and family, and attend our next series, which is Wednesday, February 7th. And the title is Building Independence and Safety at Home with the Ring Video Doorbell. If there are no more questions, we'll see you on February 7th. And I hope everyone has a good night. Thank you so much.